Hello everyone, today we are going to discuss a material that is quite special. It comes from an organization called the Australian Buddha Vihar Association, and it is an internal document marking their youth anniversary. However, interestingly, the core of this material is not about looking back at the past, but rather looking forward to the future. They have defined Arvin Arvu as a critical turning point and proposed a commission called Translating Understanding into Action. This is fascinating. Think about it, an organization that has spent 6 years primarily on learning, thinking, and understanding is now suddenly saying it is time to act. So, let us unpack what kind of shift has occurred behind the scenes and exactly what they plan to do. The entry point of this material is very brilliant. It doesn't start by listing achievements from the past 6 years. Instead, it begins with a profound self-inquiry we have studied for 6 years. So how exactly should we practice great compassion? This sets the tone immediately. It is no longer an abstract philosophical question, but a very concrete, grounded agenda for action. How exactly do we effectively remove the root causes of suffering from people's lives? This question is the starting point for all their upcoming actions. They quickly identified a specific entry point. They observed a universal phenomenon where people generally fall into an unconscious mode of self-destruction, especially regarding diet, bread, pasta, and various processed foods. Things we are all too familiar with are seen as the crux of the problem. But the key insight here isn't simply pointing fingers at unhealthy eating. It dives deeper into the psychological mechanism behind the behavior. The document emphasizes that these dietary habits aren't just bad choices. They stem from childhood experiences, advertising bombardment, and cultural biases. Automated habits. They use a specific word I programmed. They state that people reach for bread and pasta not because they decided to do so, but because they have been programmed to do so. Everything is automatic, conditioned, and reflexive. This idea is quite subversive. It suggests that what we often think of as free choice is merely the execution of a pre-written program. When you reach for a cookie, is it really you? Or is it a program in your brain regarding a 7 p.m. energy refill? Or a childhood conditioned reflex that sweets equal happiness? When a behavior becomes a pure reflex, true free will effectively ceases to exist. This elevates a simple health issue to a philosophical level concerning consciousness and freedom. Moreover, this programming leads directly to physical suffering, specifically chronic diseases. Thus, to solve physical pain, one cannot just treat the body. One must modify the solidified psychological programs that cause the suffering. So, having diagnosed the problem, what is their solution? How do you modify a program people don't even know exists? Their answer is the core of this turning point. They didn't start a series of meditation classes. Instead, they did something surprising yet logical as they established a company. It is a public limited company named Vital Choice Ltd. Vital means life in Latin, so the name implies life's choice. This practically writes their core philosophy on the signboard as suffering comes from wrong choices, and liberation or health comes from making the right choices. This is a clever transformation. They didn't preach esoteric Buddhist doctrines. They created an entity that looks modern, scientific, and mainstream. This seems like a strategic translation. They realized that communicating with modern society using religious language has limits. But if you use the language of health, science, and nutrition, the audience expands. It is like finding a translator to pass an important message. Vital Choice translates the abstract concept of removing the root of suffering into preventing chronic disease through scientific diet and lifestyle. It bypasses belief barriers and cuts straight to what modern people care about most: health. The killer app of their plan is the tool they use to help people make these choices as science. They believe that in this era, The most persuasive thing is not ancient scripture, but data-backed, peer-reviewed research. This is their smartest move. They aren't trying to change people's belief systems. They are leveraging the trust people already have in science. For example, they won't simply say sugar is bad. They will cite data showing excessive sugar intake is directly linked to at least 45 different diseases. They won't just say eat less staple food. They will explain the biochemistry of how refined carbs break down into glucose. Just like sugar, the power of this approach lies in the absence of moral judgment. It simply states objective scientific facts about how the body operates, handing the power of choice back to the individual. When a person clearly knows the consequences based on evidence, the internal drive to change is generated. The most exquisite part is how they express compassion and removing suffering work. Eastern wisdom using code, rational Western scientific evidence. The goal hasn't changed, but the tools have been modernized. The document uses a beautiful metaphor for this. The senses are manifestations of a Lalakatesvara Bodhisattva, just as the Bodhisattva manifests in whatever form is necessary to help beings. Wisdom here appears as a scientist in a white lab coat because that is what modern people trust. Science becomes a skillful means of compassionate action. But is this just a health project? Or is it spiritual practice? The document gives a decisive answer. Little Choice is Buddhist practice. It is defined as the preliminary practice of compassion. They cite a core passage from the Alatamsaka Sutra to reveal their roadmap. Great compassion arises because of sentient beings. The starting point is seeing others suffering and wanting to help. Because of great compassion, Bodhisattva is born by realizing one's limited ability. One seeks greater wisdom, Bodhisattva, to help everyone. Because of Bodhisattva, one achieves perfect enlightenment. This altruistic drive leads to the ultimate goal. Little Choice is the first step of this loop, addressing the concrete suffering of disease caused by diet. It is not empty theory. It is rolling up sleeves to solve a real problem. This is why Arling Arwu is their turning point. After 6 years of input, learning, they are starting the output, action. They haven't changed their mission but have expanded the language used to achieve it. The most valuable lesson here is the ability to translate, reinterpreting profound principles using widely accepted tools. They build a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern life. Finally, this material leaves us with a profound question. It shows how we are programmed regarding diet. But in our lives, what else do we firmly believe are free choices, but are actually just undetected? Automated reactions, our consumption, our scrolling habits, our definitions of success. How many of these are truly ours? And how many are programs running in the background? Perhaps we should try to observe a decision we make today and ask ourselves, is this truly a choice? Or is it just another program running? This question might be far more profound than we imagine.